Welcome to the Read Aloud for May 8th, day 53. Okay. See where we were. We're about halfway done with this book already. I have one question, Your Grandness, said a voice in the audience. What happens if one of the chocolates we are giving away in our shops gets eaten by a grown-up? Well, that's just too bad for the grown-up, said the Grand High Witch. This meeting is over, she shouted. Out you go. The witches stood up and began gathering their things together. I was watching them through the crack and hoping to heaven that they would hurry up and leave so that I might be safe at last. Wait, shrieked one of the witches in the back row. Hold everything! Her shrieking voice echoed through the ballroom like a trumpet. All the witches suddenly stopped and turned and looked toward the speaker. She was one of the taller witches, and I could see her standing there with her head tilted back and her nose in the air, and she was sucking in great long breaths of air through the curvy pink seashelly nostrils of hers. Wait, she shouted again. What is it? The others cried. Dog's droppings, she yelled. Just then I got a whiff of dog droppings. Oh. Surely not, the others shouted. There couldn't be. Yes, yes, shouted the first witch. There it is again. It's not strong, but it's there. I mean, it's here. It's definitely somewhere not too far away. What's going on down there? Shouted the Grand High Witch, glaring down from the platform. Mildred's just got a whiff of dog's droppings, Your Grandness, someone called back to her. What rubbish is this? Shouted the Grand High Witch. She has dog droppings on the brain. There are no children in this room. Hang on, cried the witch called Mildred. Hang on, everybody, don't move. I'm getting it again. Her huge, curvy nose holes were waving in and out like a pair of fishtails. It's getting stronger. It's hitting me harder now. Can't the rest of you smell it? All the noses of all the witches in that room went up in the air, and all the nostrils began to suck and sniff. She's right, cried another voice. She's absolutely right. Dog droppings it is, strong and foul. In a matter of seconds, the entire assembly of witches had taken up the dreaded cry of dog droppings. Dog droppings, they shouted. The room is full of it. Pooh, pooh! Why did we not smell it before? It stinks like a sewer. Some little swine must be hiding not so very far away from here. Find it, screamed the Grand High Witch. Track it down, rule it out. Follow your noses till you get it. The hairs on my head were standing up like the bristles on a nail brush, and the cold sweat was breaking out all over me. Rule it out, this small lump of dung, screeched the Grand High Witch. Don't let it escape. If it is in here, it has observed the most secret things. It must be exterminated immediately. Metamorphosis. I remember thinking to myself, there is no escape for me now. Even if I make a run for it and manage to dodge the lot of them, I still won't get out because the doors are chained and locked. I'm finished. I'm done. Oh, Grandmama, what are they going to do to me? I looked round and I saw a hideous painted powdered witch's face staring down at me, and the face opened its mouth and yelled triumphantly, It's here, it's behind the screen, come and get it. The witch reached out her gloved hand and grabbed me by the hair, but I twisted free and jumped away. I ran, oh how I ran. The sheer terror of it all put wings on my feet. I flew around the outside of the great ballroom, and not one of them had a chance of catching me. As I came level with the doors, I paused and tried to open them, but the big chain was on them and they didn't even rattle. The witches were not bothering to chase me. They simply stood there in small groups, watching me, and knowing for certain that there was no way I could escape. Several of them were holding their noses with gloved fingers, and there were cries of, Pooh, what a stink. We can't stand this much longer. Catch it then, you idiots, screamed the Grand High Witch from up on the platform. Spread out in a line across the room and close in on it and grab it. Corner this filthy grumboil and seize it and bring it up here to me. The witches spread out as they were told. They advanced towards me, some from one end, some from the other, and some came down the middle between the rows of the empty chairs. They were bound to get me now. They had me cornered. From sheer and absolute terror, I began to scream. "Help!" I screamed, turning my head toward the doors in hope that somebody outside might hear me. "Help, help, help!" "Grab it," shouted the Grand High Witch. "Grab hold of it. Stop it yelling." They rushed at me then, and about 5 of them grabbed me by the arms and legs and lifted me clear off the ground. I went on screaming, but one of them clapped a gloved hand over my mouth, and that stopped me. "Bring it here," shouted the Grand High Witch. "Bring the spine little worm up here to me." I was carried onto the platform with my arms and legs still held tight by many hands, and I lay there suspended in the air, facing the ceiling. I saw the Grand High Witch standing over me, grinning at me in the most horrible way. She held up the small blue bottle of a mouse maker and said, "Now for a little medicine." Hold his nose to make him open his mouth. Strong fingers pinched my nose. I kept my mouth closed tight and held my breath, but I couldn't do it for long. My chest was bursting. I opened my mouth to get one big quick breath of air, and as I did so, the Grand High Witch poured the entire contents of the little brown bottle down my throat. Oh, the pain and the fire. It felt as though a kettle full of burning, boiling water had been poured onto my mouth. My throat was going up in flames, and then very quickly the frightful, burning, searing, scorching feeling started spreading down into my chest and into my tummy and on into my arms and legs and all over my body. I screamed and screamed, but once again the gloved hands was clapped over my lips. The next thing I felt was my skin beginning to tighten. How else could I describe it? It was quite literally a tightening and shrinking of the skin all over my body, from the top of my head to the tips of my fingers to the end of my toes. I felt as though I was a balloon and somebody was twisting the top off the balloon, or top of the balloon, and twisting, and the balloon was getting smaller and smaller, and the skin was getting tighter and tighter, and soon it was going to burst. Then the squeezing began. This time I was inside a suit of iron, and somebody was turning a screw. And with each turn of the screw, the iron suit became smaller and smaller, so that I was squeezed like an orange into a pulpy mess with juice running out of my sides. After that, there came a fierce prickling sensation all over my skin, or what was left of my skin, as though tiny needles were forcing their way out through the surface of the skin from the inside. And this, I realize now, was the growing of mouse fur. Far away in the distance, I heard the voice of the Grand High Witch yelling, 500 doses! This stinking little carbuncle has 500 doses, and the alarm clock has been smashed, and now we are having instantaneous action. I heard clapping and cheering, and I remember thinking, I am not myself any longer. I have gone clear out of my skin. I noticed that the floor was only an inch from my nose. I noticed a pair of little furry front paws resting on the floor. I was able to move those paws. They were mine. At that moment, I realized that I was no longer a boy any longer. I was a mouse. At that moment, now for the mousetrap, I heard the Grand High Witch yelling. I've got it right here, and here's a piece of cheese. But I wasn't going to wait for that. I was off across the platform like a streak of lightning. I was astonished at my own speed. I leapt over Witch's feet right and left, and in no time at all, I was down the steps and on the floor of the ballroom itself and skittering off among the rows of chairs. What I especially liked was the fact that I made no noise at all as I ran. I was a swift and silent mover, and quite amazingly, the pain had all gone now. I was feeling quite remarkably well. It's not a bad thing after all, I thought to myself, to be tiny as well as speedy when there's a bunch of dangerous females after your blood. I selected the black leg of a chair and squeezed up against it and kept very still. In the distance, the Grand High Witch was shouting, "Leave the little stinkpot alone. It is not worth bothering about. It is only a mouse now. Somebody else will soon catch it. Let us get out of here. The meeting is over. Unlock the doors and shove off to the Sunshine Terrace to have tea with that idiotic manager." Bruno. I peeped around the leg of a chair and watched the hundreds of witches' feet walking out through the doors of the ballroom. When they had all gone and the place was absolutely silent, I began to move cautiously about the floor. Suddenly I remembered Bruno. He must surely be around here somewhere too. "Bruno," I called out. I wasn't seriously expecting that I'd be able to speak at all now that I had become a mouse, so I got the shock of my life when I heard my own voice, my own perfectly normal, rather loud voice coming out of my tiny mouth. It was wonderful. I was thrilled. I tried it again. Bruno Jenkins, where are you? I called out. If you can hear me, give me a shout. My voice was exactly the same and just as loud as it had been when I was a boy. Hey there, Bruno Jenkins, I called. Where are you? There was no answer. I pottered about between the seat legs, trying to get used to being so close to the ground. I decided I rather liked it. You're probably wondering why I wasn't depressed at all. I found myself thinking, what's so wonderful about being a little boy anyway? Why is that necessarily any better than being a mouse? I know that mice get hunted and they are sometimes get poisoned or caught in traps, but little boys sometimes get killed too. Little boys can be run over by motor cars or they can die of some awful illness. Little boys have to go to school. Mice don't. Mice don't have to pass exams. Mice don't have to worry about money. Mice, as far as I can see, have only two enemies, humans and cats. My grandmother is a human, but I know for certain that she will always love me whoever I am, and she never, thank goodness, keeps a cat. When mice grow up, they don't even have to go to war and fight against other mice. Mice, I felt pretty certain, all like each other. People don't. Yes, I told myself, I don't think it is at all a bad thing to be a mouse. I was wandering around the ballroom floor thinking about all this when I spotted another mouse. It was crouching on the floor holding a piece of bread in its front paws and nibbling away at it with great gusto. It had to be Bruno. Hello, Bruno, I said. I glanced up. It glanced up at me for about 2 seconds and then went right on guzzling. What have you found? I asked him. One of them dropped it, he answered. It's a fish paste sandwich, pretty good. He too spoke with a perfectly normal voice. One would have expected that a mouse, if it was going to talk at all, would do so with the smallest of squeakiest voice you could imagine. It was terrifically funny to hear the voice of a rather loud-mouthed Bruno coming out of a tiny mouse's throat. Listen, Bruno, I said, now that we are both mice, I think we had to start thinking a bit about the future. He stopped eating and stared at me with his small black eyes. What do you mean we? He said. The fact that you're a mouse has nothing to do with me, but you're a mouse too, Bruno. Don't be a fool, he said. I'm not a mouse. I'm afraid you are, Bruno. I am most certainly not, he shouted. Why are you insulting me? I haven't been rude to you. Why do you call me a mouse? Don't you know what's happened to you, I said. What on earth are you talking about, Bruno said. I have to inform you, I said, that not very long ago the witches turned you into a mouse, and they did it to me. You're lying, he cried. I'm not a mouse. If you haven't been so busy guzzling that sandwich, I said, you would have noticed your hairy paws. Take a look at them. Bruno looked down at his paws. He jumped. Good grief, he cried, I am a mouse. You wait till till my father hears about this. He may think it's an improvement, I said. That's where we're going to stop.